Well, by now, most of the world has seen the tragic video of the senseless beating and alleged murder of Tyre Nichols by 5 Memphis police officers. This is tragic. But let me ask you a question. What does this really mean for law enforcement and its future? What does it mean to you and I? Well, we're going to talk about that and a whole lot more on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. Well, what some people are calling the fastest minutes in podcasting.
And opinions expressed in this podcast are those solely of individuals interviewed and participating in this show and do not represent those of Peacemaker Network and Charlie Crimebuster. All individuals described or mentioned in the podcast should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This podcast contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. Hey, we appreciate you being a part of the Charlie Crimebuster podcast. All are welcome. And we, as always, invite you to reach out with a shout-out. Hey, you can reach me, Charlie Crimebuster, at gmail.com. CharlieCrimebuster at gmail.com. Hey there, we welcome questions, suggestions, opinions. Even if they differ from ours, you're safe to share those. If you even want to reach out and just say hi, reach out with a shout-out, CharlieCrimebuster at gmail.com. Gmail.com. If you'd like to support the podcast, help us help America's heroes. That's the good cops, not like the ones we're talking about today. If you want to help them, the first responders, military, well, then go to PeacemakerNetwork.com. PeacemakerNetwork.com, and you can find out how you can be a supporter of the podcast. By the way, we're going to make that available in our show notes. A link there, you can just click onto it. Now, before we get into today's program, I want to take a moment to share a crazy crook story with you. Seems a little more respectful in light of this story today than rather to break into the middle of it. So here, my friend, is our crazy crook story this week. It comes to us from a police officer who talks about how he responded to a domestic violence call. Here's what he says. Well, I went to a domestic violence call where the woman claimed her husband hit her. When I asked her how it happened, she told me he couldn't provide the kind of life she wanted him to give her. So she said since he had had a heart attack and got lupus, well, he wasn't working. So then she decided, well, that she should start inviting some friends over to have sex with her for money. Mind you now, she's telling that to a fully uniformed officer. She went on to say to the officer that he, her husband, should act as the person who handles the money. In other words, be her pimp. She then calls someone to come over and tells her husband that after he gets paid for the sex, he should hold the guy at knife point and take the rest of his money. And then she went on to say because he refused to help her with that, they got into an argument. And then that he pushed past her to get out of the apartment. And now she's claiming, get this, the fact that he pushed past her to get out of the apartment because she was trying to get him involved in crime, well, she claimed that was the assault that she called the police officer for. Well, the officer then asked her if she understood that she had just admitted to planning a felony crime. Well, she looked shocked that planning prostitution and robbery was wrong at all, and she did not get why the police was not arresting her husband for trying to remove himself from her stupid plan to get both of them arrested. So, my friend, this lady idiot who called the police because, number one, her husband refused, first, to be her pimp, secondly, to assist her in a robbery, had to push his way out from her, and she calls the police and tells on her husband, and then in that one time that she called the police, she incriminated herself in not one, but 2 crimes, one of which is serious felony. My friend, well, yes, you got it. This indeed is our crazy crook story of the week. How will this last revelation of police conduct really impact law enforcement? Well, first, let's talk about what actually happened. Who was Tyre Nichols? Well, he was a young man, 29 years of age, and he worked at FedEx. He had a 4-year-old son. His mother, Ravon Wells, well, she said he would go to the same Starbucks every single day. She went on to also say that he enjoyed skateboarding and would go to his mom's house for a lunch break each day. Now, Tyre, he was watching skateboarding when he was on his way home. Now, according to his mom, he had left the park where he liked to skateboard. He liked to also watch others skateboard, and he also enjoyed a beautiful sunset at that park. Now, we do not know if Tyre viewed a sunset on January the 7th, but if he did, it would have been his last one. On January the 7th, around 8:30 p.m., Memphis police officers pulled over a vehicle for suspected reckless driving. Now, that's according to a statement from the Memphis police. It went on to say that a confrontation occurred between the officers and the vehicle's driver, who, of course, has been identified as Nichols, Tyre Nichols. And Nichols, who then fled on foot, according to the Memphis police, well, then officers apprehended him. And another confrontation occurred, confrontation number 2, which resulted in Nichols' arrest. Now, that incident happened just a few blocks away from his home. Now, Memphis Police Chief, C.J. Davis, she told CNN's Don Lemon on Friday, she said, we've looked at the cameras, we've looked at the body-worn cameras. Even if something occurred prior to this stop, well, we've been unable to substantiate that at that time. So there's even some question about whether this was a proper stop or not. It was a brutal beating. She went on to say, we've taken a pretty extensive look to determine what the probable cause was, that is, for the stop. And this is what she says, quote, we have not been able to substantiate that. Now, she went on to say it doesn't mean that something didn't happen. There's just no proof of probable cause for the stop at this point. Now, also, it's unclear who was involved in the initial police counter. Now, how far Nichols fled on foot, we don't know that either, or how the officers apprehended him, how long those confrontations lasted, or why officers felt compelled to confront Nichols not once, but twice. But, my friend, the police body camera footage and the surveillance cameras around the city at businesses, all this, well, it does paint a picture about what happened prior to that traffic stop. But after the officers stopped, after they stopped his car, there was definitely a physical interaction involving Nichols. This is as the officers are trying to get him out of the car. In fact, if you see the video, as I have and others, they ran up there, already angry, already aggressive. Yet we still really don't know the original reason for the stop other than they said reckless driving. Now, from the very beginning of the encounter, Chief Davis says officers were riled up. She says the escalation was already at the very beginning at a high level. The nature of the traffic stop, and these are her words, was very aggressive with loud communication. And then from there, it escalated. Now, that initial altercation there at the first part of the stop, well, pepper spray was deployed. Nichols ran. And Shelby County District Attorney Steve Melroy said this Thursday news conference. He reported that. He went on to say Nichols got away, but the officers found him again at another location. And at that point, there was, now get this, this is what the district attorney says, there was an amount of an aggression. Well, here's the way he called it. It's certainly, simply unexplainable. He went on to say there was another altercation at a nearby location at which serious injuries was experienced by Mr. Nichols. After some period of time of waiting around afterward, well, then he was taken away to the ambulance. By the way, my friend, you might want to know that according to reports, it took 23 minutes for him to get medical aid. Now, Chief Davis, she brings out something else. She said, I heard him, that's Nichols, call out for his mother, for his mom. She said that referring to the video. And she says that this is just the disregard for humanity. She went on to say this is what really pulls at your heartstrings and makes you wonder, why was a sense of care and concern for this individual, well, why was it just absent from this situation by everybody who went to the scene? And again, as I said earlier, it was an elapsed period of time before medical help for Nichols was rendered. This was after he was injured. After some period of time, he said he was taken away by ambulance. And then sadly, on January the 10th, just 3 days after the stop, well, Nichols, he died due to injuries sustained in this, quote, use of force incident with officers. And this was reported by the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, what is called in Tennessee the TBI. They went on to say that Nichols suffered extensive bleeding caused by a severe beating. That was according to the preliminary results of the autopsy. And then they went on to say, we can state that preliminary findings indicate that Tyre suffered extensive bleeding caused by a severe beating, and that his observed injuries are consistent with what the family and the attorneys witnessed on the video of his fatal encounter of police. That was on January the 7th. These were words from Benjamin Crump, the attorney. You see, on that trip home, Memphis police officers pulled him over for what they alleged was reckless driving. And the night that he was killed, well, he told the police that, hey, I just want to go home. He said he just wanted to go home. And in what they believed were his final words, well, according to the Times, he called out for his mother. Well, now, my friend, that video has been released to the public, and many have seen for themselves how these 5 goons with a badge, I call them 5 bullies with a badge, not even going to give them the honor of calling them a police officer. You see, police officers serve and protect. They do not torture and kill. These guys did torture and kill. And in my opinion, they do not deserve to be called police officers. Now, Memphis Police Chief C.J. Davis, get this, in talking about this video of these bullies with a badge, she says it's perhaps even worse than the infamous Rodney King footage. Remember that? She went on to say, I was in law enforcement during the Rodney King incident, and it's, very much aligned with the same type of behavior. That's what she told CNN. She went on to say, I'd say about the same, if not worse. Now, if you recall, in 1991, King was beaten by a group of Los Angeles Police Department officers, an attack that was captured on civilian video. That attack, by the way, later spawned the 1992 Los Angeles riots. That, my friend, resulted in dozens of deaths after a jury acquitted, or they would not and could not reach a verdict for excessive force with those officers that was involved. Now, Nichols' family's attorney said Tuesday that following an independent autopsy on Nichols, that his body was actually done, by the way, by not just anybody, but nationally renowned forensic pathologists. Well, that the findings do indicate, again, that he suffered extensive bleeding caused by severe beating. Now, the 5 officers involved, let me say the 5 bullies involved. I'm not going to call them officers. Remember, I told you that. Well, these 5 bullies, Bean, Martin, Mills, and Smith, and Haley, they were fired after an internal review of their actions. And now, my friend, they now face second-degree murder charges, along with several felonies. The police chief said, I was outraged. She went on to say, it's incomprehensible to me. It was unconscionable. And she said, I felt I needed to do something, and I needed to do it quickly. She says, quote, I don't think I witnessed anything of that nature in my entire career. And she went on to say, yes, it was that bad. Now, Davis and authorities, this past Friday evening, they released on video on YouTube, and it's spread around the world now. And Davis, she pled with Memphis citizens not to react violently when they saw the footage of the attack. She did encourage them to protest if they felt it necessary, but to do so peacefully. And thank God, my friend, at this recording of this podcast, so far, that's mostly been true. Davis did describe the video before it came out. She said that it would show acts that defy humanity and violates the sworn duty of care for police officers. She said they failed to de-escalate the situation in a proper manner. She called again the officer's aggression to Nichols as unexplainable. And you remember we talked about how he cried out for his mom, and, well, Davis said that's why this incident, the disregard for humanity, as I mentioned before, I think that's what really pulls at your heartstrings. And it makes you wonder, why was the sense of care and concern for this individual just simply absent from all those who went to the scene? Davis did say, the chief said she spoke to Nichols' family and felt their sense of pain. And when Davis was in that interview, one of the reporters pointed out this. They said the policy for the Memphis Police Department requires officers to intervene and stop excessive force and report those incidents immediately. And then the reporter went on to ask the chief, did anyone on that video, will we see that anyone, or will we see on that video that happened at all? And Davis said, you will not see that on the video. And that's so true. We didn't see anybody step in to protect this young man's life. Now, as the video was released, there was a consistent and unified call for peaceful protests. Not only a call for peace from Chief Davis, but a call for peace from the mayor, a call for peace from Tyre's own family. Protest without violence was the best way to honor this man and his family. And by the way, remember, friend, this really was not a racial crime. All 5 bullies were black. Bullies with a badge. They were black. Though some people have wondered, would these 5 bullies with a badge, would they beat a white man in the same way? Well, I believe they would have. You see, far more white people were killed by police than blacks. In 2022, 374 white people were killed by police. 220 black people were killed by police. And while 1 is too many for people who have loved ones, well, most of the time, my friend, the police have it right when facing these matters. They face these matters putting their own lives in danger, and they do it correctly. But my friend, this is one time they did not do it correctly. These 5 bullies with a badge do not deserve to be called a police officer, as I said earlier. They deserve to rot in jail. So now, let's just take a moment and let's talk about what it means to law enforcement today. I believe because the Memphis Police Department moved quickly, in other words, after the proof was in, they immediately fired these officers and then followed that very quickly by charges of second-degree murder. I believe because of that. Now, there have been some who have attempted to explain away the actions of these officers. People said, well, their adrenaline was running high due to chasing Tyre down. My friend, I got to tell you, that dog will not hunt, that ship will not sail, and that excuse will not work. You see, officers, we're trained to keep adrenaline from causing us to do deadly mistakes. They are trained to intervene also when someone else is taking the law in their own hands, not showing care for the suspect. You see, when that man was pulled over, they were not only responsible to enforce the law, but they were also responsible to protect the citizen that was now in their custody. They were trained to protect him from great bodily harm if possible. It was possible in this incident, and they did not. Instead, they willfully and wrongfully beat this man to death. Well, thank God the department acted quickly, decidedly, and that deserves credit. Probably one of the reasons why we're having peaceful demonstrations. Now, I believe that there are several things that will come to law enforcement as a result of this horrific crime. Yes, it was a crime. First, I believe police departments will investigate more quickly. They'll determine if officers are at fault more quickly. and they will fire and charge people more quickly. And my friend, that is a good thing if they are indeed in the wrong. You see, videos and public documentaries and commentaries, well, they're going to be released to the public in an effort of the departments to be more transparent. And that, again, is a good thing. Those documents, they need to be released. Next, more officers, unfortunately, will retire, and less people will apply. Now, this has already been happening in post-George Floyd time, and now it will continue and maybe even increase in numbers of officers retiring and people who will not apply for the job. This will keep some good men from training new people. Next, I believe people will become more distrustful of the police, and some may not comply to law enforcement doing their jobs. And sadly, unfortunately, this will put both the police and public in greater danger. And there is a much more chance now that officers who abuse the badge will go to jail for it. And if it is done in malice and anger like this was done, it is as it should be. Again, I've got to say it, these 5 bullies with a badge deserve to rot in jail. Now, normally in this part of the podcast, we would recognize courage. We try to show a courageous citizen, people who show courage in the midst of crime and danger. However, I'm not going to do that today, because no one responded to this incident showed courage to stand up for what was right. Even the EMTs, it seemed that as they responded, they purposely took their time, some 23 minutes before he got medical attention, as if this citizen did not deserve the right to treatment. So, my friend, there's no courage, unfortunately, to honor today in this incident. Now, thankfully, the chief had courage to rush the firing and to charge these officers. But that, my friend, is as it should be. It's not an outstanding feat. Now it is time for some lessons to learn. First, a couple of weeks ago, I told you that I've never been more proud of law enforcement than in the manner that the Moscow Police Department conducted themselves. That was in hunting down the killer of 4 precious college students there in Moscow, Idaho. I said I had never been more proud of law enforcement. Well, today, my friend, I've never been more ashamed of law enforcement than in the way that these 5 bullies with a badge beat and killed this man who did not deserve to die the way he did. It is outrageous what they did to this man. Next, to all my law enforcement friends, it is now time for you to make up your mind that you will not stand by if those in your ranks follow the intentional harm to a citizen, suspect or not. It appears that all these participants were in this miscarriage of justice and policing. Not one of them refused to participate, and no one intervened to try to save life. So make up your mind now. If you wear the badge, make up your mind you will not be a part of this public display of excessive and unnecessary force. Do what you're sworn to do. Protect the public, including even those you arrest. Only use force necessary to enforce the law. Now, to those who do not wear the badge, I have a message for you. Do not allow these 5 bullies who used to have badges turn you away from the thousands upon thousands of brave men and women who put on a badge and put their lives in danger between you and evil every single day. Those who do right deserve to be treated right. Do not taint them with the same shame that these former bullies with a badge brought onto themselves and their department. Support the brave people who do good. Go to peacemakernetwork.com. Read about how you can be a part of the progress and not a part of the problem. So, my friend, with a heavy heart today, until this time next time, let me encourage you, pray for swift justice regarding these rogue officers. Pray for comfort for Tyre's family, and practice situational alertness in your own life. Yes, my friend, be safe, be alert. For the life you save, well, it may be your very own.